Hi, everyone. This is Megan.
And this is Steven.
And this is the Synchrony podcast where we talk about transforming apostolic dating culture and ending loneliness in the church. I'm very excited about this episode, babe.
I am very excited about it.
This is our first time doing a remote interview on our podcast.
I know.
We finally bit the bullet.
We finally did it, yeah.
And figured out how to do it.
Yeah.
This is a really special episode for us guys because we're going to be introducing you to some of our dear, dear friends that we've known at least one of them since well before we were married.
Yeah.
They've had just a really amazing impact on our relationship.
Quite literally, she was part of the reason why you got talked back into dating me again.
Why I talked myself back into dating you.
Well, she talked common sense into you.
Yeah, she was more of like a empathetic fairy godmother. But they are two of our friends that have a beautiful dating story and just an amazing marriage. And they have done incredible things in their life and their walk. So I can't wait for you guys to meet them and to hear about their history. And the goal of us sharing them with you is really to just inspire you with stories of people that have done apostolic dating in really unique and healthy and powerful ways.
That's right.
So can't wait for you to meet them.
Yep.
Before we get into that, though, we have a couple of announcements.
Yep.
What are you drinking tonight, babe?
I am drinking a large mug of coffee.
Coffee from Cafe 117. Cafe 117 is an apostolic-owned coffee company. They sell premium single origin and blended coffees that do good. So when you buy from Cafe 117, a large percent of their proceeds goes toward a variety of apostolic aid organizations like Compassion Services International, and they take those funds and they do really amazing things in the world. So we love to support them and partner with them, and they have been kind enough to give our listeners a discount.
That's right.
So if you scoot on down to the description, you can get yourself that discount and go buy yourself some excellent coffee. And we love them. Thank you guys so much for your support.
Cheers.
Ding. Yeah, I'm not drinking coffee right now. I will be drinking coffee later in the episode. You will definitely see me.
Yeah. So we had to pre-record our intro and outro, which is why you see us change clothes.
Post-record our intro and outro, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But also just wanted to give a disclosure that we end up looking at the computer a lot because we're having a conversation with someone over video call. So if you see our eyes not looking at the camera, that's why.
Yeah, we won't be making eye contact with you this time.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
But if you're wondering, that's why. But
yeah. So yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with our friends. A couple of other quick things though. If you haven't already heard about this, we are going to be at the ALJC National Youth Conference coming up in just a couple weeks. It's
That's right
around the corner.
Like 2.5 weeks away.
Yeah. So Thanksgiving week is when we'll be there, and we will be giving out our Synchpins.
That's right. And we will be doing live interviews for our podcast.
Yeah, we're excited about that. So if you do not have a Synchpin yet, remember, these are intended to be worn just by apostolic singles as a subtle but clear signal that you are interested in meeting someone to date. So if you would like to get a Synchpin for yourself, you can either find us at NYC and we'll give you one right there for free, or you can go to the link in the description and register for us to ship you one.
Yep.
And so we'll get you one as soon as we can so that you can have one for all of your winter conferences and apostolic social events and everything that's coming up toward the end of the year. It's always a really busy time for us to get together and hang out.
That's right.
Awesome. I think that's all of our announcements. All right. Oh, no. One more. We have a sale.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When's our sale happening?
It is starting the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So basically
we don't have a nailed down date exactly.
I'm planning on doing a Black Friday like everybody else that does sales.
Sure.
So enjoy your Thanksgiving nice and relaxed, and
that's
then start talking to all your friends and family about signing up for Synchrony.
Yeah. And we're going to be doing a pretty hefty discount too on the sale.
Yeah, we really want to get a lot of people in the door before the end of the year.
So keep your eyes open for that.
Okay, I think that's my last false start with announcements.
Yeah.
Okay. So enjoy this conversation with our friends, the Reverends Jennifer and Johnnie Peyton. And we hope you guys really enjoy getting to know them and hearing about their story. It was really fun to chat with them about it and just get their thoughts.
It was fantastic. Enjoy.
Hi, friends.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you guys for hanging out with us on a Sunday afternoon after a busy church service.
Yes, it was a very eventful service. Stories that we will tell you off the recording.
That sounds great.
But when you live for God and when you do ministry, these things happen, and you just roll with it.
That's absolutely true. And I love how immediately we were like, oh, we're going to spend an hour talking. We're definitely not going to keep our church clothes on. We're definitely going to immediately become as comfortable as possible. So we're just going to pretend that we're like hanging out in one of our living rooms doing this.
Yes. Yes.
So I should formally introduce you guys to the listeners. So this is Jennifer and Johnnie Peyton, who have been really Reverend Jennifer and Reverend Dr. Johnnie Peyton.
Completely unnecessary.
We'll let you guys give like your resumes in a second because I think they're awesome. But you guys have been friends with us for a ridiculous amount of time, which was really impressive considering how weird we are. So you guys have
Jennifer has tolerated me for a very long time.
Yeah. How long? Jennifer has known you longer than you guys were in church together before I even met you, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember when you moved to West Palm, but it's been ages.
Yeah. I've known you since probably 2011. No, 2010, 2010 probably.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's wild. And so as we started to date, weirdly, I feel like the start of our relationships were fairly close together.
Yeah.
And if you've heard us talk about this before on a previous podcast, Jennifer is the sort of like fairy godmother that helped coach me through the decision to get back together with Steven after our breakup.
Welcome, Steven.
Yeah.
I have no idea why she talked you back into it.
No. So she's like single-handedly responsible for us being married, basically is what I'm trying to say. But so you guys, we've been married friends now. We went from being friends as single people to friends as married people. And we value you guys so much. And we always come away for our conversations just like refreshed and feeling so energized and like, sharpened. And the reason why I wanted to bring you guys on, besides just the fact that we love you and it's a great excuse to talk to you for a couple hours, was really that you guys have a unique and really important dating story. I think a lot of the challenges that we see people encounter in apostolic dating, you guys encountered and overcame in your dating life. So I'm going to ask a bunch of questions about that. But before we do you guys mind just kind of like introducing yourselves and maybe a little bit about what you do, your involvement in ministry, just kind of like give us your microwave version of your CV.
Defer to you to start.
Gosh. Hi, I'm Jennifer. So I was kind of going from the back, raised in a minister's home. So, in this through and through, I think I'm fourth or fifth generation.
Something like that.
So raised in my granddad's church. So I was raised to know and to love ministry. And that was like the ins and outs of everything. And so I've always just been mindful of the desire and passion. I just seek knowledge. And so growing up, like into my teens and into my 20s, I would always look for the leadership seminars and like I would go to the conferences. I'm the one who goes to the conferences not for like the mingle part, but for the you're gonna find me in the seminars and going to the Brother Bernard stuff, like really digging into the deep parts of the word, and so that's kind of in my 20s. That's where I was. You could find me at those types of conferences. But I growing up in my granddad's church, he kind of like empowered us, the grandkids, the grandgirls, to just be involved in ministry. And so like if we came up to him with a ministry, he would say, yeah, and he would empower us in that. And so I kind of like brought that over to kind of really wherever I went. So we moved to Lakeland, and I started going to the McGuire's church in Lakeland, and I started a VW ministry, a Virtuous Women ministry there.
Awesome.
And so it was like a mentorship basically for the college and career girls, mentoring the young girls, the youth girls. And then from there,
I'm going to interrupt you real quick just because I want to tell you a story that she hasn't heard yet, but was told to me at church today.
Oh,
just
we're
to
getting a
brag
live
on Jennifer
scoop
a little bit.
Okay.
So one of our saints came up to us, one of our elders in the church, and she was bragging on you specifically. And she said, our granddaughter started off in Virtuous Women that Jennifer led, and that was where her call for ministry was born. And then that same granddaughter came over when my wife and I were overseas. She came over on an AYC trip, reconnected with Jennifer again overseas. And just this last weekend, that young lady got licensed in her district.
What?
That
And
is
so
amazing.
this elder in our church told me, I don't know if she told you. I hope she would have told you.
Yeah, she told me.
She told you,
Yeah.
but she was bragging on Jennifer. She said, because that's kind of where her desire for ministry started, was with Jennifer's Virtuous Women ministry that she started just out of a burden
Yeah.
for the need in the church. So her ministry has really echoed and continues to echo. So sorry to
That is
interrupt.
beautiful.
No, Jennifer, I feel like the whole time I've known you, you've always had this real desire to support ministry and to
Yes.
uplift ministry, both just in sort of like the way that you're faithful as a saint. But you and I worked as like armor bearers together at some point, I think, for our pastor's wife when we were in the same church. You've worked in the mission field supporting full-time missionaries. I remember at one point when we were hanging out, you like had like all of your like missions trips sort of like memorabilia, and you had so many great memories attached to each one of like different people that you'd been involved with there. You just have always had your hands in the work, like very much like putting your hand to the plow. And you also have sort of what we would call like a formal Bible college education in addition to that. So besides just you immersing yourself in the work wherever you go, you've also like done theological study. Talk to us about that a little bit. When were you doing that work?
Yeah, so I surprised, that was my midlife crisis. When,
At like the ripe age of like 30.
yeah,
Like-
28. Yeah, so I like straight from high school I jumped into the workforce and I got a phenomenal job. I worked in insurance for 10 years. My first job, I was there for 10 years. And then it hit me like I was 27, about to be 28, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I want to be like, I was doing the ministry when I wasn't working, but I said, I want to be full-time ministry. And if I'm going to do that, I need to have the education for it. And so, I would get as much knowledge as I could, but I wanted to be like completely in it. And so I quit my job. I saved up money. I quit my job and I moved to St. Louis to go to Urshan College. And so that's what kind of that passion, I left the insurance industry because I really wanted to be in full-time ministry. And so I kind of said, you know what, let me commit to this. 28, I left and went to college. And that was, I was the first in my family to get a 4-year college degree. So that was something that wasn't really talked about, or like, it was okay if I did it, but it wasn't pushed. And so, that the push was the desire to be in full-time ministry. So that's kind of why I ended up there.
Yeah.
We'll tag into how we met and all that
we'll
stuff
circle back.
later.
We'll circle back
Yeah.
to the beginnings of you guys' story, because it sort of starts in that crucible of you both passionately seeking ministry. I want to just call out, Jen, that you in some ways encapsulate a lot of the same vision that a lot of the women that we work with in Synchrony, right? We have a
Yeah.
lot of what we call like powerful women, and we mean that in the sense that they are women who are in ardent pursuit of ministerial work. Alongside careers, sometimes juggling both, right? And it's just really cool that we get to work with so many amazing people like that. But I'm going to put a pin in your story for a second and then ask Johnnie. Johnnie, give us your microwave background.
All right. So I was born at a very young age. No, so I
That's usually where it starts.
yes, youngest I was ever been is when I was born. But no, I was also raised in a minister's home. Both my parents are licensed ministers with the UPCI. Both my grandfathers were licensed with the UPCI. One of my great grandfathers was licensed with the UPCI, and then it goes back another generation. Billy Briggs was one of the early converts in Maine. The story goes that he, well, I'm not going to get into all that, but yes, several generations in this oneness apostolic faith. And so ministry was always just a part of who I was. From my earliest memories, I was helping out in ushering. I was helping out in kids ministry. I was teaching kids class as a kid, which was always hilarious to me. That why am I doing this when some of these kids are older than me? And that seemed like it would just become a template for my ministry in general. My father pastored until I was 11 years old. We left Mars Hill, Maine, and moved to St. Louis, Missouri, where I spent my teenage years and my early 20s as well. And it was there where my ministry outside of the auspices of my family really began to blossom. I got heavily involved in 2 churches there, one as a teenager and then one as a late teen and early 20-something. That second church was where I first got licensed. I started evangelizing. I got my degree from St. Louis Christian College, not Urshan College. My degree was from St. Louis Christian College, and then I went and got a master's degree from Urshan Graduate School of Theology. And it was really just out of a desire to do whatever was needed. I've always felt a call to teach, which is what led me to go overseas. We went overseas together and taught Bible school there. It was funny because that trip to go overseas and teach was actually delayed so we could get married. I was actually originally going to go overseas as a single person. I was approved as a single person.
He tried to have a conversation with me where it was might be breaking up with me so he could go on missions, and I freaked out.
And she said, no,
you
sir.
can wait.
Well,
Sorry, had to throw that in there.
We're going to nail this down first, and then
Right.
you can go.
Right.
I was like, wait, are you breaking up with me?
But the context of that relationship was I was scheduled to go overseas for like 12 months, and it's very difficult to maintain a relationship when you're 7,000 miles apart.
Oh, sure.
And one person's 8 a.m. is another person's 8 p.m.
Right.
It's extremely difficult, and so that was where that conversation came from, and then our relationship just escalated, and she wouldn't let me alone. So I said, you know what, we might as well just get married.
I said, wait, I'm about to lose him.
She said,
Well,
"Let's
okay, so
nail
I want to
this
back.
joker down."
Losing the Jesus.
Right. Yeah. Not get the stereotypical apostolic Dear John letter. The Lord has called me away from this relationship. I do want to, let's back into that a little bit. So before we get into how you guys met specifically, what was dating life before you guys got to each other? Like, how had the dating journey? Sorry, what was that, Johnny?
I said, oh goodness.
Yeah. What was the dating journey like for you prior to that? You don't have to go into details, but like, did you find that you had dated some? What had your dating experience been before you guys met each other?
I'll go.
Her story's shorter.
No, it is. He's my first official boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was stuck in a long line of situationships, of talking ships, of non-committal ships.
Will they, won't they ships?
Yeah, will they, won't
Sinking
they?
ships.
Yeah, lots of so that's never fun. And so really he's my first boyfriend, and that was actually my prayer. Like I also, there were a couple of people who asked, and I was like, I don't see a future with you. So I didn't step into that because I was having those conversationships because I wanted to feel for if I wanted to commit to dating and then further. So, so he's my first boyfriend.
Yeah. She was not my first girlfriend.
And he's also not the first guy that I've talked to.
Sure.
Yes. No, I think that prior to Jennifer and I connecting, I mean, my goal was always ministry. And so with that was always kind of the crux of the drive that I had that brought me into relationships. So when you're at Bible school, I mean, that is the breeding ground for ministry. It's probably a bad phrase to use.
Let's not. Let's never use that term again to describe Bible college.
I mean, it's a good descriptor.
I mean, it's accurate, but maybe too on the nose.
Yeah, probably a different word. It's the petri dish. No, that's not any better.
No, let's move away from the science and animal husbandry metaphors for this one.
The point being that when you're in Bible school, everyone's going towards ministry. You know what I mean?
Right.
And everyone has goals and visions for what they want to do in
Get it
ministry.
together, Stephen.
And when you are just obsessed with ministry, I think that's very easy to see that in a lot of different people. And so
Yeah.
I went on a lot of dates. I did have a couple of semi-serious girlfriends in that time frame, but nothing that when there started being deviation, when there started being, okay, we're clearly going on different paths here. And you know, I you know, was in relationships that I probably shouldn't have been in, that I look back on and be like, you know, I shouldn't have been in this relationship. And I went through some of those mistakes. And so I was grateful when I found someone like Jennifer. I think that I had a greater appreciation given those previous experiences. And to clarify, not to say anything bad about those individuals,
Yeah,
it was
sure.
we weren't properly aligned. Those individuals are, most of them are still in ministry to this day. There was a reason, there was an attraction there, because those individuals that I dated had a call for ministry, and I had a call for ministry as well. And I think that it took finding Jennifer to realize that something can be a good thing, but you can still not be properly aligned, properly yoked in that regard. And so finding the right relationship made me appreciate her a lot more.
You guys make such a good point. We talk about this a lot when we talk about values-driven dating, that you can have two people that are sort of, you know, have an intent to live equally moral lives and lives that are in equal support of the church, of the kingdom, but be on drastically different paths.
Sure.
So to say like two people are passionate about ministry does not in and of itself mean that their values are aligned, because they could be serving in different parts of the body, and just the logistics of where they feel God has equipped them are completely different to where someone else, the other person, has been equipped.
One of the examples that we've given is you can be equally yoked in terms of like ministry level, right? But if you're not going the same direction, going with a yoked analogy, two oxen that are trying to go two different directions are still going to be less productive, even if they're the same strength.
Right.
Yep.
They have to be going the same direction.
Yeah, and that whole idea that, like, you know, I think it's so important for you to call out that even as you guys were sort of meeting people who may have been on a similar ministerial path, you still have to bring your discernment into that experience, because you don't want to create a situation where someone has married someone and now has to make the choice to compromise the calling that they feel like they're in pursuit of for somebody else's, right? Okay, so amazing. You guys are both pursuing your passions toward ministry. You meet, we can assume, in St. Louis. Is that right?
Nope.
Not in St. Louis?
No.
Where'd you guys meet? I don't remember.
On a missions trip to Greece.
Wow.
Okay, so yeah.
Youth on
take us
missions.
there.
Yeah.
Big plug for Youth on Missions.
Yes.
Your youth leaders don't want to sing this, but you might meet the love of your life on one of those
That's
trips.
true.
It is possible.
And I have to say, you might meet them and not be attracted to them or interested in them or even start dating them until 3 years later when you come across them again.
We met in 2011 on the Missouri Youth on Missions trip to Greece. And Jennifer had originally planned on going on Florida Youth on Missions trip that year, but
it was full.
I thank the Lord she procrastinated and didn't get in on time, because that trip
The
was
one
full.
time Jennifer has ever procrastinated.
Well,
I'm not going to talk about
Yeah,
that
I was
on the
going to say, that
podcast.
doesn't sound like Jen.
And so she flew up to Missouri to participate in our Youth on Missions trip, which was a huge leap for her to go with a group of folks that she didn't know any of us.
First time overseas.
Yep.
I flew up to St. Louis on my own. Didn't know anyone on the trip. It was a big step.
Yep. So she came up there. We met on the trip. It was 2011. So I would have been 18 and still very immature in a lot of ways. So we met, we connected on Facebook, and we spoke very minimally over the next 3 years. We just, occasionally like each other's, Facebook posts and comment on each other's Facebook posts, but there was no connection there. It was just
no love at first
knew
sight.
each other. No love at first sight.
I was 24. I was not considering him. I was I was there just for missions. Yeah. And I won't
he just
lie,
graduated high school.
I did. Yeah.
Well, no, I graduated at 15. But
Yeah.
The average person
Yeah.
just graduated
Yeah.
high school.
He still had the maturity level.
Yeah, I still have the maturity level of an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
Let's
We
put
were
it
all
that way.
coming
all
into
were
our
there.
own. This is all part of. I love it. Okay, so what were your first impressions of each other? Do you have any? Do you remember?
He was goofy. I mean, at Greece, yeah, he was goofy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
I was very immature.
So there's
in
a really
general.
cool thing. So we were exploring the ruins of Thessalonica, or was this Philippi? The ruins
I
of
don't remember.
Philippi, and you know, everybody's kind of like going off in different ways, and I found this cool like line of arches, and everybody else had gone off to a different area, and I saw these, and I was like, oh, this is such a cool spot to take some pictures, and nobody else saw it, and then I think he saw me,
Yeah.
and so I said, hey, can you take a picture for me? So I took, you know, he took a picture of me, and then we switched, and so
Aw,
it's
that's so
actually kind
cool.
of cool because
Yeah.
now like we have that.
And what's
awesome.
funny
Yeah.
is that of the entire week-long trip, we only took one picture together, and it was a
Yeah.
group photo with another guy in it. And to this day, I don't know where that individual was or is. And whenever we go back to, oh, this is our first photo together, it's like permanently you can see a
This
guy
guy's
cropped
cropped
out
out.
to the side.
Amazing.
So that's kind of funny. But no, we had that impression, and I honestly, I'll be fully honest, I don't know that I had an impression of her, except that
Yeah.
she was on the trip, and
You sent me some poems. Do you
I
remember
did.
that?
I
It
do
was so.
remember that.
It was interesting.
I won't tell
It was
her.
weird.
Sorry.
It's okay. You can say it, Jen.
I mean, sorry.
She wasn't the only person I
He
sent
wanted
poems
feedback,
to
and
on
I was
that
like,
trip.
"This is weird."
But we're not going into
I
that.
said it, just throwing the lines out there.
Sure.
That's
That's
right.
a wide net.
They weren't like romantical poems. They were
No.
like deep thought.
Yeah,
you know.
I once upon a time thought I was going to be a poet, and turns out I was just going to be an academic writer, and that's fine too.
It's all.
So-
It
So
all.
I'll
It's all
say
well
this
that
to
ends well.
say, listen, if you meet somebody, they send you some weird poems.
Don't just write 'em off.
Completely write them off. Just give them a couple of years.
I don't know that that's the best advice, but,
but-
No, but
we'll
it
roll
is
with
it is in its own way.
It is because here's what I love about this. Like, unbeknownst to you guys at the time, you're going to eventually end up in a place where your mission, like literal mission, but also just like the sort of the calling that you feel like is on your heart, are going to be in complete alignment. And
Yeah.
what Johnnie said of, I didn't even really have a first impression of her, is so
Yeah.
valuable because so many people have like I've quoted my friend who said, she expected to meet her soulmate because he was going to show up and just start singing to her like a Disney movie.
Yeah.
And like so many people are really expecting instantaneous chemistry
Yeah.
as an indicator of their fit for each other,
And
right?
it
Yeah.
being God's will.
Right. Yeah. The angels are going to sing. The heavens will open. A single beam of light will fall upon the face of this person, right?
No.
And
Sometimes it's just a conversation about lysine.
yeah, that was us. You guys have a better story than we do for this initial thing. But so you have this like non-impression of each other. You go your separate ways. You maintain lightweight, just like Facebook acquaintance communication. When did you guys reconnect, and when did that connection start to kind of deepen?
So I was delving. I had made that midlife crisis, and I was considering going to Urshan. So I said, you know what? Let me go to do a tour, check it out. And so I didn't know anyone in Missouri, and so I just sent a message to like the Youth on Missions Facebook group.
You came up
From
for
then-
it should be
Oh.
noted, you came up for a youth training event.
The youth workers training
There's a
event
youth
that was
workers
at,
training event that
yeah.
was in St. Louis, so
At
she
the
came up for
sanctuary.
that.
And so because I was coming up there, I just sent a message out and said, hey, I'm coming up here, if anybody from YAM want to hang out. And he was the only one who responded. And so
He's like, I still got those poems.
Yeah. Did you?
Did you ever read my poem? Sorry, Johnny.
Yeah.
We
She
do not
never
need to
read
make
my
you the butt of
poem.
I
every.
never did.
She never
It
read
was
my poems.
really, really long. It was really long. I didn't make it through.
It was an epic.
Yes,
Yes.
some of them were.
But yeah, so we hung out that day, and it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
And in that time, like, I opened up about a couple of like just life
Mm.
situations, And here's something that really stuck out to me with him. When we met at the at the campus. We did a little tour of the campus, and then we were going somewhere, and we went to the Starbucks.
Yeah.
And on the way into the Starbucks, there was a homeless lady, but she was deaf, and she was asking people for help. And so he stopped, and he knows sign language, and so he some sign language, and so he just said, "Hey, how can we help you?" Whatnot. And she needed a ride to a deaf center downtown, so she can get some resources. And so we went in, got her coffee, and then he asked, "Am I cool with it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so we drove her to where she needed. It ended up being like 30 minutes away. She just kind of kept pointing what direction to go.
She wrote down the address.
Oh, yeah.
I put it in my GPS.
And so I don't know sign language. So I was writing her notes and send it, get in the back seat, and she would write me notes back. And
lest we give any false impressions, I know some finger spelling and some very basic signs. And that's
regardless, the little that he knew.
Enough to find this out, though.
Yeah. Yes. He used the little that he knew to help somebody who needed help. That everybody were passing her by going into Starbucks. And that first impression, hello. I mean, he wasn't trying to were you trying to look good, or were you just helping her?
No.
And that stuck out to me. Hello.
Well, and I should clarify that even while we were hanging out there in St. Louis, even that trip, I wasn't like, I'm going to marry this woman. Even then, I wasn't like, I think it would be very disingenuous to say butterflies and sparks and fireworks happened. No, it wasn't happening at all. She was a friend, and okay, let's hang out together, and okay, this thing happened to happen. Okay. And in fact, I would probably say, knowing how carnal I was during that time in my life, if I was trying to impress you, I probably wouldn't have done that, because it would have taken away from our time together.
Oh, yeah.
And so, again, my focus wasn't on the relationship. It was on, okay, someone who needs ministry. And that's really a statement on how carnal I was in that time frame. Because if I was trying to court you...
If you were carnal, then you would have been focused on me.
That's right.
And not to the ministry.
That's right. See? Focus on ministry, children.
I think this is so cool, though, because people ask me all the time, hey, I'm not ready for matchmaking. How can I go meet more people? How can I meet someone that I could potentially date? Yeah, my advice is go find somewhere to work beside people. Find an opportunity to work. Go do a church in a day build. Go support a new congregation for a couple of weeks. Go invest yourself somewhere temporarily where you can work beside someone and see how their character is exercised in those spaces when it's not about impressing you. Because that's, we've all been in situations where, for better or for worse, in the context of a relationship, someone's character was very different from what it ended up being at the beginning, right? You get to know someone gradually when it's sort of set up in the beginning as a dating relationship. I think it's so cool to say no, let's go immerse ourselves in the work beside each other and see do we work well together? Do we notice the same things? I mean, the fact that neither of you was upset about this, what some people would view as an interruption to your time together, right? And both of you
some
were,
people would even
board.
If you were not truly ministry minded, would consider that to be an unsafe situation too.
Sure.
But you're both let's do it. No, that's fine.
Well, we should also clarify that this individual was 4'11" and
she was an older lady.
Maybe weighed 99 pounds, soaking wet with rocks in her pocket. So I mean, it's
I know, but
Jen could take her.
I didn't feel threatened at all. I don't know if Jennifer
but
did.
The average person today would probably not have done what y'all did.
Yeah. I think it's so cool. So you guys start this. You have this friendship that's blossoming. It sounds like, Jen, from what you were saying before, the conversation is deepening in the sense that you're feeling comfortable being vulnerable with each other about some things that are really important to you. When does the thought start to set in, oh, this might be someone I'd be interested in dating? And did it happen around the same time, or was one of you ahead of the other?
I know that after she came up, we kept in contact a little bit. And it did keep increasing. And we'd Skype each other from time to time. And I was very resistant to the idea of having a long distance relationship. So as long as she was in Florida, I didn't really want to pursue it. And so, we had a friendship, but as it was like, okay, she's gonna be coming up to Urshan. Okay, now I'm like, okay, now this is a possibility, and I think it happened really gradually over time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can. I can't pinpoint like one moment where like the sparks flew, and it was just like, oh, like this is. I can't point to like a single moment.
Yeah. I
She sent me some funny memes at one point that was like, okay,
Much more effective
we
than
have
poetry.
similar humors, but beyond that,
yeah.
love it.
I think one element is you were somewhat fresh from a breakup. In May
It's true.
you had broken up, and I think we met up in like August.
Yeah.
And so he was not in the mindset of getting
No.
into a relationship.
Yeah. Well,
So we kind of just kept talking. I part of it was I was communicating with him because so we really started talking again because I had sent that message out and he said, "Hey, yeah, I'll hang out with you." Probably assuming that would be a group thing, but he was the only one who replied.
Yeah,
do you
like going to
remember
pro, yeah.
though?
Yeah.
Do you remember though one of the biggest things we talked about while you were in Florida and while I was in Missouri?
What?
We both were the quote unquote missions
Oh, yeah.
directors for our church. I say missions
Nice.
director.
I did the missions presentations.
We both did the missions
Yeah.
presentations and not missions director. We did the
No.
missions
Yeah.
presentations.
Yeah.
And
Mission
so
spokesperson.
we would frequently share resources. We'd share missionary
Yeah.
newsletters. We'd share missionary emails.
the
Say,
day
"Oh,
before. Hey, this is what I've got. What you got?
yeah, we
Yeah,
share,
exactly.
And
We need like missionary trading cards, like baseball
Yeah.
cards.
Yeah.
You know?
they
That'd
have
be- that'd be
those,
sick.
right? They did those as
What?
well a few years
I have
ago.
them, yeah.
Yeah.
Stop.
Jennifer has a bunch of missionary
Stop.
trading cards.
That is awesome.
Oh my word! Coming soon to an apostolic bookstore near you. That's incredible. I'm gonna have to find some of those. That's awesome. So you guys were both investing into that same work, and that passion
Yeah.
was something that you guys were like landing on simultaneously in your
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
And I think
I was asking him a million questions about Urshan. So, like, because I was planning my move up there. So this is
Mhm.
like August, and I end up not moving there till the very next August.
yeah.
So, I'm just I'm a planner. So I was planning on quitting my job, but I wanted to save up so I could pay for college. And so
Yeah.
all of that.
And as luck would have it, in between that August to August, in the March in between that, I came down to Florida for a conference in Lakeland, Florida.
Oh
And
yeah,
so
I remember that.
Yep.
You were there,
And
Megan.
Megan was there.
Yeah. Oh,
I
so
was
you guys.
okay.
Okay, so at that point, Jen, you were already kind of thinking about it because I remember us talking and you being like, okay, so there's this guy. And I feel like I remember going to this conference in the back of my mind being like, I need to like scope out this, like sort of like I need
Yeah.
to like see how this man is and if he's good enough for Jen was in the back of my head. I don't
Yeah.
know if you were on that page yet, Johnny, but I was on that page.
Well, I mean, I knew that she was strongly considering moving up there, and so
Mhm.
that was a huge part of it. I mean, don't forget, in addition to me going down there, we then traveled on to West Palm, right?
Yeah.
Was that trip, or was that a different
I
trip?
don't know.
Yeah.
So we started talking August.
I don't
We just
remember.
kind of kept talking. And New Year's, I'm hanging out with all my friends in West Palm, and then he calls me and I'm like, all right, gotta go, guys. And they're like, oh, who's this? And so I think I kind of prompted him because I finally around that New Year's time, I finally prompted him. I was like, so I like you. Do you like me? I kind of
Jen,
I
you
had
made
to
the
do
first
that.
move.
I did that. I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did because I had been in so many situationships, and it had been about 6 months, and I
Yeah.
knew he wasn't interested in long distance, but we were still talking. And so I finally got to a point where I just said, I like you. and I kind of put him on the spot.
Yeah. And that led into more conversations about the fact that I didn't want to do long distance and
Mhm.
other
Yeah.
things, and it did prompt definitely more conversations about it. And I think that we made the decision though to date, I think before you had even moved up,
Yeah.
like very
March,
shortly before you moved up.
that March
was
is
it that
when,
March?
when you came and you
Okay.
talked to my pastor, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was that
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah.
See, that's the other great thing about having a wife is she gets to be my memory.
Yeah.
We slowly, as longer we're married, you guys, we've been married for around the same amount of time. I feel like our mental banks just slowly merge.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
eventually, we're just drawing from one
sharing
smaller
information.
consolidated pool.
Yeah.
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 And Student, did you have a question?
Well, no, not a question, but it's just more of an observation. Like, so
It was
instead of
great.
just lingering in a situationship, Jen asked the question. She asked the hard question and said, "Hey, I don't want to be stuck in a situationship again. Do you like me? I like you. How can we move forward with this?" And that put the ball in Johnny's court.
Yeah.
And then you guys opened up and had the hard conversations and started
Mm-hmm.
talking about logistics.
Yeah.
Why he hasn't moved it forward up until that point. He didn't
Yeah.
want to be in a long distance relationship, but then you guys figured out all of the things going forward. But it took someone saying, "Hey, this is a really cool friendship we have. Would you be interested in making it go further?"
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people wait for one person to make that move, and it's like a
And
what's the bystander effect?
Yeah, kind of.
It's kind of like everyone just keeps on hoping the other person will do it, right?
Well, and it sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, it doesn't sound like this conversation from where Jen sort of asked this was like a big, massive romantic gesture. It sounds like you had a
No.
conversation, right?
Yeah.
And I
Conversation
think
over
people are
Skype.
expecting like flowers and bouquets and like big promposal stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be that.
We were, I'll be honest, like I didn't even plan on on asking that. It was just we were talking, and then now sometimes y'all, as y'all said, late night talking, you lose your inhibitions. So
Oh, sure.
I didn't have the restraint that I would have. It was probably like 11 o'clock, and I'm just like, I like you. Do you like me? I don't know how I said it, but I just didn't. It just blurted out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't
sure.
plan it. I just blurted it out, and but I think I don't remember any other bit of the conversation.
I don't
It's
either.
just that was just the point
Yeah.
in it. Something may have built up to that, but it was just to a point to where I needed to know because I was 27, and I just was getting tired of
I think you were
situationships.
26 at that time still, but
At-
yeah.
At that point, when y'all had that conversation, roughly how long had y'all been communicating on a regular basis?
Since August, and that was
Yeah.
probably early January.
Yeah.
So
Well,
about 6 months.
And I'm still murky about the timeline with this because I'm still getting my own self confused because that conference in Florida,
That's
was-
when we became official.
right? But that was March of 2014. But I thought you didn't move to St. Louis till August of 2015. That would have been a year and a half later. No,
I think your year's wrong.
We're also
I'm
getting
After
older.
you have
Yeah.
kids, your brain becomes Swiss cheese.
Oh, my brain
Right.
is mush at this point. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna poke your mushy brain for a bit though, Johnny, because I feel like I want to talk to a degree about some barriers that a lot of people encounter in dating that we work with, right? One of the ones specifically, and you guys have heard us talk about this, is the struggle of educated ministry-minded women to
Yeah.
find men who are both supportive of that and unintimidated by it. And Johnny, you grew up in a household of ministers where your mother was also active in ministry.
Yes.
So I know that, that's inspirational, but I would love to hear from your perception. Like you were I'm going to use the term like approached by a woman who was slightly older than you. That's also something that, I think carries sort of a stigma in our community, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's like a handful of years, when you're young and you're in your 20s, there's a lot of resistance to dating someone even a couple years older than you are.
Sure.
And someone who was on track to, in her own right, be fully active in ministry in whatever facet she chose. What was your perception of that when you were thinking about what you were attracted to or what you were seeking in a partner? How did those things play into the calculus for you?
Well, I mean, her being in ministry was one of the biggest attractors. Her love for education because it was value alignment. For me, yes, credit to my parents. My mother doesn't have a degree, but she's very well educated in her own right, and she's been the grammar and proofreader editor for every degree my dad's ever done. She's edited doctoral level stuff, and so she's very well educated in that regard. And she's always been involved in ministry. My mother is also older than my father. My mother is 9 years older than my dad, and they met on the mission field on the Bering Sea of Alaska. And they went up there separately. So cool. They went up there separately to be involved in missions, and they met and they got together. And so it's very similar type of story for us. But my mother always had a drive for ministry. In fact, we laugh because of the age difference. My mom started preaching like almost a decade before my dad did. Just because of the age difference.
Your mom's like doing children's ministry, and your dad's like in
the audience.
Children's ministry. She was starting churches as like her young 20s.
Oh, what a boss.
Yeah. She helped start the church in Lewiston, Maine that's still there today. And so, anyway, but so that was my perspective. And so for me, ministerial alignment was always a huge value. And because watching my mom and dad grow up, someone who was older than me was never a barrier. In fact, I would say that the large majority of girls I dated, even before her, were all older than me. And part of that was logistics. I started college at 16. So that's part of it, the
community you were around was like
exactly
slightly ahead of you.
Yeah. Everyone I was around was at least 2 or 3 years older than me. So that was never a barrier in my mind. So I definitely credit my upbringing to that in a lot of ways, but I'm grateful for it because the longer I've been involved in ministry and the longer I've talked with people, it is somewhat of I hear ministers or just couples, I should say, who will joke when the wife is, a month older or 6 months older, and I'll be like, oh yeah, she's rocking the cradle.
Oh,
and
I do that all
like,
the time.
Yeah, and then it's like, no, my wife is 6 years older than me. My mom is 9 years older than my dad, and that people can't fathom that. But if you look at the ministerial success that my parents have had, if you look at everything we've been able to accomplish together, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish the things that we've accomplished separate from each other. No. We definitely wouldn't have been able to. And so I think having that open mind to say, Lord, whatever's right, we got married when she was 29 and I was 23. And those didn't go without comments from people on both of our sides.
Oh, sure.
But for us, it was just like, okay, we know this is right for ministry. By the time we got married in 2016, we'd known each other for 5 years. We'd been talking, quote unquote, for at least 2, and been engaged for a year. So by that point, I mean, we were sure that this was right. So, long answer to a short question, but
it's beautiful though. You said something that I want to kind of chase, which was, things that you guys couldn't have done separately that you were able to do together. And steer me away from any of this if you don't want to chat about it. But like, you guys, your early years of marriage were challenging in the sense of the work that you were trying to do and the spaces that you were in. You went overseas. You immediately got immersed in all kinds of facets of ministry. You guys have you've been through challenging circumstances in starting your family, and you now have a beautiful baby boy. Like, those things weren't without complexity. How did that focus on, even if it was sort of unconscious, on that values alignment, kind of coming back to that central focus on ministry, impact those early years where you were sort of in the grind of building your ministry and doing evangelism and everything you guys were involved with?
I think one of the big things is both of our mindset is ministry, whatever it looks like. I like to think of myself as a plant in a pot, and I'm movable until God roots me somewhere, And so we've been kind of traveling around in a pot wherever God puts us. And so we got married December 30th, 2016, and May, he graduated with his master's. I graduated with my bachelor's. And then 5 months after we got married, we moved overseas for our first AIM assignment.
Yeah.
And then we came back from that, and then we evangelized
Full time
out of my SUV. For up and down the East Coast, we evangelized for 9 months.
Yeah.
Raising funds to go back overseas.
Yep.
And so this was our first 2 years of marriage was, not having, your first time home and not having all of these things that you think when you get married, you're, going to have this beautiful life with a picket fence and all of that. It was ministry. The focus was ministry and how, and that's the thing. When I quit my job, I said I wanted to be in full-time ministry. And so that's what we did. And so that, I think, is what just our focus, that we were both being fulfilled in our callings and our ministry and our purpose, is what helped to sustain us in our first 2 years of being happily married, because we were being used in ministry.
Yeah. Yeah, those first couple of years, I mean, I look back on it now. I mean, God's blessed us now with comfortable jobs and a nice place to live. We're rock solid rooted in a church. But when I think about like those first 2-3 years now, like looking back on it, I was like, my goodness, we were in a different church every single week. We were going overseas, and to travel to the other side of the world 6 months into marriage. I mean, that's,
Right. And you guys, I mean, just to put a mark on it, like, and not to esteem one mission field against another, but you weren't like in the UK. You guys were in Vanuatu, like literally opposite side of the world.
Yeah.
Just,
An island
I think
nation,
it's, I mean, I think it's a different field. Maybe it's not necessarily, no field is easy, but it's maybe a less approachable field than it would be for someone else who had done just like sort of the travel that you do in the States, right?
Sure.
It's very far away.
Yeah,
Sure.
it wasn't a youth on mission trip.
Right.
No. Although a youth on mission trip did come over while we were over there, an AYC
Nice.
trip to be more specific.
Yeah.
And that was fun because I get to work with young people. That's a big part of our ministry as well, is working with young ministers, and so that was really exciting. But yeah, no, it was a very different world and a very different lifestyle, very different culture. And we're very grateful because we already had a high value for missions separately. She had been on mission trips on her own. I had been on mission trips on our own, short 1 week things. And that's great. But I think seeing each other in that ministerial context, seeing each other's heart, seeing each other's passion, I think that a lot of times you can both have a passion for ministry, but I think seeing each other in ministry is huge.
I think one big thing is when it comes to, like, when I went on that initial trip to Greece, in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, it'd be cool if I met somebody, and I did. Didn't know it, but I did.
Yeah.
But the thing is that how we really ended up together is because of my pursuit as a single woman in ministry.
Yeah.
For ministry. So I quit my job because I wanted to go into full-time ministry, so I needed to get an education in it and wanted to know what I was talking about, have the study techniques, all of that. So I was pursuing that. And in that pursuit, God placed the person, we were aligned in that pursuit. And so I think that's the thing. I'll be the person. I was always thinking, man, I'm in my late 20s. I was planning on having my first baby by 25, and I'm not even married. I really struggled with that for a while. And funny enough, like, I finally guys were never out of the picture, but I had finally focused in on, okay, I'm going to stop waiting around. Let me just pursue ministry. And it was in that pursuit that alignment came through.
Yeah. And I think going back to what you said about you just being willing to ask the question, you knew where you were headed, and you didn't have time to waste of like, let me just wait till this guy comes around and asks, will he, won't he? Like, I've got things to do. Let me figure out where this is going now so I can plan accordingly.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. And you guys, I think one of the things that I love about your story is that you weren't, Jen, what you were talking about was sort of like, we would call that like a period of extended singleness, right? Being single when you didn't expect it to be. You guys didn't meet each other and start dating and immediately like throw caution to the wind and dive headfirst into an intense dating relationship and a quick marriage either. Like, you really
No.
built a very firm foundation, like Johnnie was talking about, of knowing where the other person was headed, committing to that life of ministry together. I can't imagine that it would have been as, you know, that you would have been as united maybe in those early years of just headlong, full throttle ministry had you not taken the time to really know. And I just think it's just a great example of like being in that extended singleness shouldn't rush you into something.
Sure.
It should, because like now, you guys are doing ministry, you're also working, you've also started your family. Those things have been brought to bear in your life in maybe a different timeline than you had expected, but you set the foundation first, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the beauty of this is like going back to the analogy we said at the beginning about, being equally yoked.
Mm.
If during that first part of your marriage, if y'all didn't have the vision of ministry and going the same direction, correct me if I'm wrong, going to Vanuatu and coming back and going full-time evangelism wasn't easy.
No.
I'm assuming.
No.
Yeah. And when times got hard, you guys had that similar vision to root yourself and say, hey, it's hot here. Hey, it's difficult here. Hey, I am tired. And when one of y'all were getting on each other's nerves, you had to sit down with each other and say, hey, we're doing this for the same reason.
Yeah.
I'm sure neither of you ever got on the other person's nerves in your first couple years of marriage.
But this is why I'm talking about when two oxen are going the same direction.
Yeah.
You're so much more powerful of an influence. And even if you want to stick with the same like agricultural parallel, like when you hit rocks in the soil, you're gonna plow through that rock if you're going the same direction and working together. Whereas if you're divided, you're just gonna get caught in every root and every rock that comes your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about it all the time. Like values alignment is such an important tool for apostolic dating in particular, because we believe that like there's strength in that unity. I mean, there's so much scripture behind that, right? Where if you can unite about a shared vision and you can sort of focus on it together, you're going to be able to do more than you could as a single person. And that's not to say that single people can't have a massive impact or that their impact is in any way limited. God can take a single person's effort and multiply it in ways they couldn't imagine. But there is a special kind of joy and enrichment and sharpening that comes from doing it with your spouse that you just, it's hard to imagine. I'll speak to our experience. Like, I don't think I would like the version of myself that I have become as much if I'd pursued the same things as a single person. Being with you has made me a better and more polished version of the person doing this work, right? I imagine it's similar for you guys.
I'm sure the version of you without me probably would not have pursued bees.
Probably not. I would have had fewer bees in my house most of the time.
Watching y'all even from afar and also up close, obviously we haven't always been in the same country, but it's been interesting to watch y'all as well, because y'all went down to been involved in ministry in a couple different churches, been through a couple very different seasons of your lives, and to see where y'all are at now, I think our relationship and y'all's relationships are parallel in a lot of ways, because seeing the adversity y'all have went through to get to the point where you're at now, and to see y'all in a project like Synchrony that is taking off and doing amazing. I don't think you find those things easily when you are just seeking them on your own and figuring out, okay, how am I going to do this on your own? I think that having a partner who's willing to support you in some of those endeavors. I mean, starting up something like Synchrony was a big risk. Right. And putting yourself out there in a lot of ways, similar to, very different types of risks, but going overseas is a risk. Starting a big ministry, putting yourself out there is a risk. And I think that those risks are easier when you're yoked up with someone correctly. and they make the necessary risks of ministry and the necessary risks of life easier.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so I'm going to kind of shift out of your story a little bit and ask for if you guys to drop some wisdom for our listeners. So I haven't sent you guys any questions ahead of time, so this is going to be really fun. Really, what I would love for you to do is, can you give advice to someone in the same place that you were in before you started dating? So thinking back to where you were in life and ministry and pursuit and, you know, all the logistics of that, knowing what you know now, having found a person to serve with and work with, what advice would you give to a young person in those same shoes about their dating journey?
You want to start? Do you want me to start?
Go ahead.
All right. I think that we've said it a lot, and I don't know that I can say it enough, but making sure that God and is your primary pursuit. And I say God specifically, not just ministry, because even ministry is a secondary pursuit to being in right relationship with God.
Mm.
I think that too often we love quoting scriptures like seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added unto you. We love that stuff until that all these things are added unto you are not the things that I want, and they don't happen in the timeline that I desire.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reality is, when you do put God first, God does take care of his children. He takes care of them in his timing, in his own unique way. And it doesn't always look like the timeline that we want or maybe we desire. But anyone who's seeking ministry has to be willing to put God first. I taught about a year or so ago at our church on Romans 12. It says, present yourselves a living sacrifice unto God, which is your reasonable service. And the rest of that passage talks about knowing the good, perfect will of God, and talks about the different parts of the body and how we all work together. And Romans 12 is beautiful, but it all starts with an impetus of being a sacrifice. You don't get to the point where you're finding his will. You don't get to the point where you're in right relationship with the body, whether that's in a romantic relationship or just other people, unless you start with being a sacrifice. You have to start with being a sacrifice in Romans 12 before the rest of it. Nothing else is going to make sense in Romans chapter 12 unless you start with being a living sacrifice. And that's saying everything that I want, I desire, my proclivities, my selfish nature, my fleshly nature, my preferences. The Lord is not bound to our fleshly preferences. And so with that, if sometimes when we're talking about that living sacrifice, we forget that means everything that makes me, my preferences, my priorities, my proclivities, anything that I would want in this flesh, I have to be willing to give that up. And when you can get to that point, I believe that God is going to give you the desires of your heart, because he's going to give you the desires that should be in your heart. He's going to realign your priorities. He's going to realign the things that you want. I think that looking back, I definitely would have kept that same ministerial drive, but I think I definitely would have been more patient in the timeline, because I started dating when I was 16 or 17 years old, and I didn't end up getting married until I was 23. So I look back on it and I was like, and realistically, 23 is still very young to get married. Jennifer was 29 when we got married.
28.
No, you were 29.
Yeah.
Math.
And so with that, I think that I think I would have definitely been a lot more patient in the process, and try to be more discerning in the process, because I think that would have saved me a lot of heartache when we got to that point. So
Yeah.
So I just love how God does things. Because I'm glad he went first, because I had something and I thought, I don't know about that. And then he gives the exact scripture. He talks about sacrifice. So I'm going to go with what I thought, because it was all confirmation.
great minds think alike. Unity,
I love
equally
it.
yoked.
That's
Equally
right.
yoked.
That's right.
That's why I'm laughing
the
while he's
hive
speaking.
mind that we're slowly developing as a married couple.
So one of the things that I think so often happens when people are kind of dating and in that dating pool is And especially if you're involved in ministry, I kind of want to post this out there. Thinking about we're being a living sacrifice, and we're sacrificing our life, our ministry, our relationships, everything to God.
Yeah.
I think one thing that happens is people might get into a relationship and then not tell people about it. And something hidden might be something you're ashamed of. And so I think one element is if you're if you're talking with someone, or if you're wanting to get into a relationship with someone, if it's something that you've got to hide, you probably already know the answer. But also if you're involved in ministry, I think there's a responsibility that you have to be open and transparent with your leadership.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If your leader, I was, I don't think there's like a written rule, but when it came to ministry, I was involved with ministry under Pastor Kyle in West Palm Beach. And so because of that, when we were dating, I wanted Pastor to meet him.
Yeah.
Because he's my spiritual authority. And who am I to get engaged to somebody without my leadership knowing them, meeting them, having a conversation with them? And so when I talked to Pastor Kyle and said, hey, I'd like for you to meet with him, and all of that. And so not just the one, I'm just saying I made it a sacrifice. I sacrificed Johnnie. I sacrificed the potential for the relationship. And I think some people will not do that. And
by that you mean like putting the relationship up in front of ministry and knowing that they could say it's not a good idea.
Yeah. Because your ministry will likely know you. If you are really involved in ministry, they'll likely know you. Your family knows you.
Yeah.
And so if you end up, getting engaged and marrying somebody and moving off to somebody with someone, and the people that you're closest to haven't had a chance to get to know them, that's a cause for pause and concern, and it may be just the time that person hasn't had enough time with them. But I think taking the time to sacrifice and say, is this something I'm hiding? Do I think that people would not approve? Go ahead.
Well, let me say it like this. I think that a lot of times we are too self-reliant on figuring out our relationships.
Talk about that. We don't do it in community.
We don't
which
do
is
it in
totally
community.
antithetical to Scripture. Right.
And I'll tie that. I'm gonna take a big lap around. I'm gonna tie this in as a promo for Synchrony here in a minute. But I think that if we are in proper relationship to the body of Christ, we are going to be trusting our pastors for their insight. We are going to be trusting our leaders for their insight, our spiritual mentors. In the same way, I wanted her to meet. Obviously, my parents were in ministry, but I wanted her to meet my pastor. I was very connected to a lot of the professors there at Urshan, and so I really wanted her to meet Jim Littles, someone who did our premarital counseling and has also done multiple sessions of postmarital counseling.
Our pre-engagement counseling.
Yeah, he did our pre-engagement counseling. And then premarital counseling.
That.
And then postmarital counseling as well. Multiple sessions. Thank you, Dr. Littles. And with that, I think that I'm trying to figure out a nice way to say this, but it's very arrogant to assume that we're going to be able to figure out our relationships on our own. It's very arrogant to assume that we're just going to know all the right things and we're going to know all the right ideas. And I think that using a service like Synchrony, I know the two of you well enough to know that you aren't doing this void of spiritual, seeking spiritual direction. You're not doing this as people who aren't filled with the Holy Spirit, who aren't seeking God's will, who aren't submitted to your leaders and your pastors. I know y'all well enough to know that this isn't carnal for y'all, it's spiritual. And so with that, I think knowing that, okay, if there are people out there who are better at this than I am, why wouldn't I utilize that?
Right.
Sure,
It doesn't mean
yeah.
that we're arranging people's marriages,
Yeah.
but
Right.
No.
like lean on the expertise that you have available to you
100%.
ministerially or elsewhere. I'm on board with that.
Yeah. I mean, and
100%.
now we've had so much of a sample size, right? Sample size and
Right.
research is everything.
Yeah.
And when we
Data.
first got, yeah, exactly. And so now we have several hundred, or not several, sorry.
Oh, several hundred is accurate.
Yeah, I guess several hundred examples of different people's experiences with dating that we can now lean
Yeah.
on and say, hey, X percentage of this amount of people have gone through the same amount of things.
Right.
Here's some good advice in this direction from what we've seen.
Yeah.
But one, thank you for the kind words. But
We did not pay them.
no.
Then I retract everything. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
No, just
yeah.
kidding. Just
Oh,
kidding.
yeah. So the check's not in the mail? What?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take us toward a direction of wrapping because we've kept you guys for a long time on a Sunday afternoon. But I am so grateful that you guys would be willing to come talk about your story because I think it's going to inspire so many people who, maybe it'll help reset some expectations about what finding a true partner looks like. I think that people have an expectation of what things are going to be like when they meet the person that God has intended for them. And we don't really believe that there's only one person on earth that you could go be a partner with. And what your story shows is that patience and coming together in alignment on what you really valued and what, your passions were. It doesn't have to be like butterflies and unicorns and all of the tropes of, romance that we've been trained to feel are the auspices of a great relationship. You guys have built a beautiful life together and a beautiful ministry together. And the fruits of that are just is showing up in so many different places across, all the different fields that you guys have touched. And I mean, both foreign fields and also just wherever you sort of planted yourself temporarily to work. It's just great. And so I want people that are listening to this to really take away that you don't have to, fall madly in love with someone at the beginning to find a great partner and a beautiful romance in that relationship eventually. And that if you're seeking out the right things for the life you believe God has called you to live, you're setting yourself up for success in your relationship and whatever challenges come after it that you guys are sort of encountering together.
I love that it's an example of giving something another opportunity, even though you didn't feel the butterflies right away.
Yeah, Jen didn't just say like, "Oh, that kid sends weird poetry," and just write you off for forever. Well, guys, before we sign off, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure we covered or any other details that we left out that you feel like are really important for people to know about your story?
Jennifer's amazing.
We agree. You're
Sorry
amazing
for telling
too.
the world about your poem.
Listen,
I'm sure it was great.
those poems were awful.
I love it. I love it so much. It's such a good origin story.
I
So
just have
cute.
to say, because longtime listener, I just love Megan, the song that you made for Steven.
Now we have to put it in the show notes.
No, we don't.
Anyone
Oh,
need
man.
it? I've got it. No,
Yeah,
you shared it a while ago. But
Yeah.
the thing is in your podcast, you typically, talk it down, but it's a beautiful song.
Oh, thank you.
And you sent it to me before you sent it to him. And it's a song that I sang over and over again, and I wasn't even in love with Steven. I was just singing it to my whoever.
Jen was my proofreader for this romantic package that I was getting ready to send Steven. Like, hey, do you think this is too dorky? And thank God she had to read some of Johnny's poetry because she was like, no, this is fine.
Listen, it's good if I approved that. And I didn't even read his poem, so it was really good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, Steven and
Sorry for the aside, just had to
Steven
say
and
it.
I just both lucked out marrying incredibly musically talented individuals. So we
Yeah.
both lucked out in that regard.
No,
Yeah.
and it's been so fun to be married sort of alongside you guys. And we have that kind of great married couple friendship where when we do have those moments in between parenting and ministry and all the stuff to reconnect, it always feels so refreshing and rejuvenating. So I'm excited for the next time we can actually hang out and drink coffee in
Yes.
person. But
Cafe 117.
yeah, we'll bring you back. But in the meantime, I just love you guys, and I'm so appreciative that you take the time for this. I think that this is going to really impact people and give them hope and
Yeah.
give them a different vision of what their future could look like. And I'm just excited to see that pay dividends down the road. So thank you so much for
Thank
hanging
you.
out with us. We love you a whole bunch.
And
We
I
love
also want
y'all.
to say, I want to say publicly, thank you, Jen, for tolerating me when you were in West Palm. We worked outreach together, and I say we worked outreach. I was like rambling ideas, and Jen was actually the one to execute things.
He was the visionary, and I was like, okay, so this is how we're actually going to get this done.
Yeah,
Mhm.
No,
but
I love that. I love that. Loved working with you, Steven. I had to keep you straight.
yeah. Well, speaking of times in my life that I was immature, I was like, yeah, this is great.
It was practice for when.
And Jen's like, yes, I will. I'll make sure this gets done.
Well, thank you guys. This has been so much fun, and I hope you have a wonderful week this week, and that we get to bump into you guys soon, so I can
Yes.
kiss that sweet baby of yours.
Yeah.
Be great.
Yes.
Thank you,
All right,
y'all.
love
We
you
really
guys.
appreciate it.
So
Yep.
those were our friends, Jennifer and Johnnie Peyton.
It was.
Jen and Johnnie, thank you guys so much again for coming to hang out with us. It
Yes,
was really
thank
cool
you
to
so
talk
much.
to you, and for letting us guinea pig our virtual interview.
Yeah, you guys did a great job, by the way.
Yeah, amazing. What were your kind of like main takeaways from our conversation with them?
I would have to say the story of Jennifer deciding to just pursue her
Mhm.
values in her ministry,
Yeah.
and God opening up the doors for her to be able to find Johnnie along the way.
Yeah. And she was never, looking back retroactively as her friend, she said this in the episode, like she was never closed off to the idea of
No.
meeting someone. So it wasn't
No,
like she
but
was
it
like,
wasn't like she was just going to wait around for someone to show up on her doorstep anymore.
exactly. Like I love that she was never like, I'm going to dedicate this time to God and I'm just never going to talk or think about boys. It wasn't like that.
No.
But she was just like, I'm tired of waiting around for the right person to come help me do this. I'm going to go do it
Yeah.
myself.
And I think that sometimes singles get stuck in a rut of wanting to wait to get married to pursue ministry,
Yeah.
which understandably so. There are some difficulties with not being married and doing certain ministries. I
True.
understand that. But she says, let's just take the bull by the horns and just go ahead and do it. And God opened up the doors.
I thought that was awesome.
And Johnnie got lucky enough to find her.
Yeah. Despite the poetry.
Good job. Yeah, despite the poetry. Good job responding to the Facebook call out of seeing who can help her around the town,
Yeah, give
the
her a
city.
tour of the campus.
Yeah.
I loved the things that Johnnie poured out too. I mean, I love how these guys think, like not
Yeah.
just because they've been trained, in ministry, but also just because I think they think so critically about
Yeah, they're deep thinkers.
yeah, and about how, the work of the church moves. And I thought Johnnie just had really great things to say about him marrying an older woman,
Yep.
a woman who was actively pursuing ministry, and how beautifully that lent itself to all the things that they were trying to pursue, and how, his ministry and their joint ministry was enhanced by their partnership. It wasn't like any of those things were barriers or boundaries to what they would do. They facilitated what they could do together.
Yeah.
It's been so beautiful to get to know them and watch their whole story blossom. We were part of their wedding. We've been the friends that we would try to link up with them whenever we're in the same zip code.
Yeah, exactly.
And make sure we hang out. And I always come away from spending time with them feeling just so rejuvenated and refreshed. So
Yeah.
I hope you guys enjoyed hearing from them, and that their story blessed you and inspired you.
Actually, on that note,
Mhm.
Leave a comment. What inspired you about this episode?
Yeah, that would encourage other people, but also really bless them. So
Yeah.
I think it would be great for them to be able to see the impact of their story.
Well, and also I think it helps when people realize that they're not alone in learning something new.
Yeah.
And hearing other people say, oh, yeah, that was something that stood out to me can help go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you again to Jen and Johnnie for being with us,
Yep.
for sharing with us.
Thank you, y'all.
Don't forget that you can get your Cafe 117 discount in the description.
And look out for the sale.
Big end of year sale coming soon. So please start talking to your friends about it. you've got those people that are like, I don't know if I should. I don't know if I want to do that. Now is the time for them to get involved. Or, well, now being the end of November is the time
Yeah.
for them to get involved. So, just make sure that they're keeping an eye on our socials and paying attention so we can get them looped into all of those amazing benefits. We can't wait to work with them.
Yeah.
Hey, I love you.
I love you too.
Your haircut looks nice.
Thank you.
It's really funny that in this episode, you're going to have like short trimmed hair
And
on
then-
either end of it. And
oh,
then
yeah.
like very long hair in the
Oh
middle.
yeah, it's like very Beetle-esque.
Yeah. Your hair grows really fast.
It does. I look like a mushroom.
Well, I love you, even though sometimes you look like a mushroom.
That's okay. Thank you. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bless you.
I did that in a good section to pause.
Yeah, you caught me in the
I
middle
tried,
of a breath.
I tried waiting.
Do you have more?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, y'all.
Steven's a diva.
Can
I'm the
this make
problem
it
child.
into the bloopers?
We'll do it.
To be fair, I am the primary
Stop talking, just sneeze.
caretaker of our sick kids this
Yeah,
last week.
that's true.
We'll see how it goes. Yes, ready to go.
And now Jennifer's smacking me over on my side because I was like, oh, Steven's sneezing. I'm going to check the football scores real quick if he's still
Oh, that's
sneezing.
good.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
yeah.